great because we're going to talk about really quickly some of the things that we see make good and great web chat experiences. And just a quick housekeeping thing, if anyone has questions as we go, drop them in the chat, raise your hand, chime in, interrupt us. We're happy to answer those, even if it means that we have to push it to the Q&A at the end. But yeah, we'll get going with your top five before we go into the live build.
Yeah, so website assistants are obviously very different than most other platforms, especially voice. And so one of the main things that you'll kind of find, and this is kind of just to kick off my like best practices or things specific to websites, is that a lot of times these are your current customers or people who are working with you, shopping with you, interacting with you, and are spending a lot more time in this space on your website than they would in your app or with your voice assistant or something like that. So you can really personalize the experience with the information that you already have on the person, whether that is they're logged in, you're asking for their login or their order number or their email. And then you can really enhance their experience by having a lot of personalization, especially in the retail space, which is what we're talking about today. You can really personalize that shopping experience based on how they're already interacting with your brand.
Yeah, spot on. And I think one thing we always say too is don't ask for everything if you already know it in your database. Ask once and then delight with all that information later in the experience. And that's we'll do that today, as you mentioned.
Absolutely. You can also ask them to confirm. So if you're saying, you might know their email address or you're asking for their email address, and then you can say, is this Hillary? As opposed to asking, what's your name? Because like Sam said, you already know the name. So this is definitely going to be a hot topic for today, which is talking a bit about AI elements and generated content. So as far as a helpful web chat assistant goes, it's always nice and it's fun for us to flex our sort of free-flowing conversation and our technology and allow for the user to say whatever they want and delight them with a response as opposed to an error. However, we want to keep in mind that the business outcome is what is most important to these experiences. So giving them options, presenting them with, buttons, carousels, or even lists of things that your chatbot can do makes it a lot quicker and easier for them to get to where they want to go. Because in most cases, the user isn't there to just chat with your chatbot. They are there to generate an outcome. And so we want to make sure we're getting there as quickly as possible.
Yeah. And as Hillary mentioned, you might have seen obviously all the GPT and LLM launch, but our AI freestyle launch is very helpful in exactly that, right? Where you can go off the rails, capture better fallbacks, but then get the conversation, the chit chat back onto a business outcome pretty quickly and without having to design for it. So we'll touch on that lightly today, but much more to come in that space on those recent feature launches. Number 3.
Yeah, so this is like extremely specific to website chat because with most other assistants, especially with SMS, which is the platform that I design for primarily, you're able to kind of keep that conversation persistent. It's similarly with Messenger. You can message the person after they close out, but on a website, you cannot do that. So this probably should be number one, but kind of like the most important thing to remember when you are interacting with a user on a website is that you want to capture a way to contact them, either if they happen to close out or if you want to be in touch with them at a later time. And so getting something like their email, their account number, their phone number, so that you can sort of link that specific conversation with their account is not only a good way to kind of, capture that lead or that user, but it's also a way to attribute this conversation. So if they are then having a conversation elsewhere, you're able to actually have that log that you've already talked to them about this issue or they already own this product. So it's a really important thing to make sure that you are capturing that information. And in some cases, people are asking for it right in the beginning, saying, hey, before we get started, what's your email or what's your account number? There's a number of different ways that you could do this. You could also wait towards the end of the chat, which of course has pros and cons to if the person actually makes it that far. But it's definitely something to make sure that you do at some point during your conversation.
And then number 4 and 5 here.
Yeah, so next tip is to just kind of think a little bit outside of the box of how you're going to present a website chatbot. So obviously the default that most people think about is having this like always present customer support little bubble in the corner. But there are other ways that you could activate this. So you could think of, somewhere in your funnel of, say, a person is browsing on your website and they get 3 or 4 pages in, and then it pops up and it offers to have a personalized shopping experience with them. It's something that you're doing while maybe they are looking at something like life insurance, and while you're doing the quote, you kind of activate it there and you have the chatbot do the quote with them. Or it's something that you can do once they've placed an order. There's a lot of different options that you can do aside from just having something general. So really think about, what the goal is of the business that you are creating this chat assistant for, and where you can activate it. And maybe you have a few different points where you're going to want to use that tool.
Yeah, and we'll see when we deploy today. You can put that the code snippet on specific landing pages, or have it just obviously on the body of the entire website. That's a great way. Maybe you're demoing exactly how you want the Peloton Tread landing page chatbot to work. Well, then just put it on that page, right? And that goes that step further when it comes to prototyping, let alone being in production.
Yeah, and it would be a lot more useful to someone to have a specific experience that's about this particular product. That would be, content or tutorials or troubleshooting about that, as opposed to just anything and everything sitting right here. It makes it a little bit more usable.
Everyone hopefully can see the Voiceflow screen here. You can see myself and then also Hillary. So obviously we're not going to build totally from scratch and the whole thing, because that would take hours upon hours. So we wanted to just build a specific flow and kind of give an idea of a Peloton web chat before putting it on the site. So here, Hillary, I want to jump in, and obviously we have like a welcome message here, and we've left some notes as if we had like a pre-design meeting. But I do want to call out one of our newest features, which is AI Assist. So sometimes we might see a standard menu like this. So instead, what we can do now, as I reshare here, you can see here I already had generated some. But let's say we had like, how can I help you today? We're able to go in and actually immediately AI generate, let's say 5 variants based on the how can I help you today. So here we have, what can I do for you? I'll accept that, right? And we'll jump back in. What can I do for you? How can I assist you? How can I be of service? What do you need help with? And what you're able to do from here is actually, okay, maybe you don't want to say what do you need assistance with, so you can remove that. Taylor's doing that. She's going in to edit the variants. We can see here that we have like an open-ended prompt listening for an intent. So what I'll go ahead and do here is create some buttons within this. As we talked about and Nathan brought up, you can have obviously open-ended design or more button-driven design. And here in Voiceflow, we're able to do both, right? So we have listening for an intent, but we also know, okay, we're going to build, let's say, the shop for equipment flow. So great. So we're going to actually add that button here, as well as having obviously it listening for more of an open-ended intent. So we'll have shop for equipment. I'll add a button. We'll say, check order. And we'll say, classes and membership. Great. Which allows us to jump in and actually keep the check order a little bit more organized. So one thing I want to show here is that as you jump into check order as an intent that we've already built out, I've worked with a developer on our team, just as you work with a developer on your team, to then build out a dynamic API call. And this API call is referencing a sandbox Airtable database that I've built. What we're able to do is capture just the email, and then that email allows us to actually backfill all of the information about that user, just like your own customer database, and actually serve it up. So let's take a test here, a test drive here.
Yeah, and this is something that you could use if you had Shopify or if you had any sort of database that you're using for your customers in order to reference their orders. So this is something that is going to be very common in any retail use case. So the different ways that you could think about using this specific feature to connect your APIs is really cool. And it's really cool, especially to what June was asking earlier. to be able to demo, this is how I want this to function. So this is exactly how it would look. I don't need to use fake information. I can use real information and I can test it out and the person can see. They type in Sam's email and it says, you know, great, I see your order here, Sam. That's another example of using that personalization with the data we already have. We don't need to ask for Sam's name because we already know Sam's name.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you could see here we have these variables already predetermined. So it's saying, you know, your tread will arrive on this date. But that's obviously a flow I had already built out. But I think, Hillary, this is a good chance then to jump into the shop equipment flow and take a look at, you know, what could a quick flow design in Voiceflow look like before we put the chat widget onto the Peloton website. Hillary, so we'll start with the carousel. Do you want me to drag one out here?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we'll have the carousel here, which would just be kind of like that initial, you know, of the 3 products. And what we can see here is we can do images, cards, titles, and buttons, which would be like a standard chat carousel. So I'll build this first one for the tread.
Okay.
And we'll create some options. Peloton tread. We'll add a button and we'll say like, see more, for example, right? And I'll drag that out.
So then I could build one also for the bike, right?
Yes. Well, and you can actually go right into the carousel and add a card here. So I'll jump out of that top carousel. As you do that, I had a question. Do you suggest using whatever I consider important enough for buttons to utilize these as topics? Yeah, like it's to each designer's preference. You know, you're able to use topics to organize your canvas however you'd like. I think we've seen people obviously nest intents under each of the topics. So topics to us can be kind of like an organizational function to really group core intents or the way in which a user would navigate your assistant. Here, I think you're right. Like I use kind of the 4 core menu buttons as the organization of the topic.
So I'm just adding the rower here. You can see on Sam's screen, just the image just popped up. And then I could add my buttons of like see specs. And I'll also add another one to read reviews. Especially with a new product, you want to, you know, give people the ability to read reviews on that.
Yeah.
And you can see how that populates now.
Put this down here.
And you can see me in my little icon in here.
Great. So why don't you hop out of that block and then I can run in and jump in and do a quick test. And then, so we'll click play, take a look at this. Great. So now you can see these 2 have populated. We have the tread, we have the rower. These are going to be clickable and we can send them anywhere in the conversation that we'd like. I'm going to hop back out so we can get to the final product here. So we have shop for equipment. And as you can see here, I'm going to attach an intent, which I'm actually going to create this. So we're going to have here, we're going to create an intent. We're going to say shop for equipment. So then we can see here, so this is going to be the intent, and we need to generate utterances. And this is actually a thing that many conversation designers do not like doing because it obviously takes a long time. You're always in the NLU model. So one thing you can do here with AI generate is, let's say we're going to generate 5 utterances. And we're going to say, great. So then we have here, I want to shop for some equipment. I'm looking for equipment to buy. Show me equipment. I need to shop for some equipment. What equipment can I buy? So we'll say, let's remove that one, and then we'll create the intent. A lot quicker, a lot easier than manually writing a bunch of utterances, right, Hillary?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what I think, you know, as we're all kind of thinking about how can we use AI in our conversation design, are conversation designers still necessary to this process? You can see that this really is, to me, kind of like a shortcut. So instead of just, even clicking to create new ones and having all these new buttons and dragging all these blocks, you can just have it create it for you. And then you can go in and edit it. So it can be really used as like an outline and so a way to brainstorm what are the different ways that I could be phrasing this, and then how can I actually go in and make it more in my brand voice? How can I make it a little bit more personalized, and how can I make these variants actually a bit different? So it's a really good way to just kind of like get started, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Great. So then we have obviously the shop for equipment menu item here, the initial open menu item. So then we can say we're going to jump into shop for equipment. And instead of maybe in the past, you might have drag a line all the way to where you want to go next, all on one big canvas. Now what we can do actually is attach an intent right here. So we're going to go just a bit. We're going to go for the shop for equipment intent right here. So then great, someone could click this, right? But they could also type in shop for equipment or any of those utterances to trigger that topic, that intent. A little bit cleaner of an experience overall.
Yeah, I definitely like this as opposed to having all the lines that connect and having to like shift the lines so that they're not crossing over each other, etc. And just so you all know, I just went into this intent and I even added things like I want to buy a Peloton and things like that that it wouldn't necessarily generate on its own. That are going to be things that you may want to fit into this specific utterance. You could also add those as additional variants manually, or you can just edit the ones that are already there.
That's a great point. So here I'm going to go in and actually train the assistant. We generated all those utterances. Now we need to make sure the NLU model is actually trained on those utterances. But even here, you can see in this initial test, we have, the hey, how, welcome to Peloton. One of the first variants, how can I help you today? And then you can see we actually have these clickable buttons. So when we click there, it would jump there once trained. Great. So back to the shop equipment. Hillary, while I explain the widget, do you mind just adding one more click through here, maybe to like a URL that maybe you'd actually use at peloton.com to see more?
Yeah, sure.
Or even just a link to that product page. Great.
Yeah, I'll link to that product page.
Okay, wonderful. Laura asked, how do you change the color of the buttons to red? That's a great question. I'm actually just about to jump into that. So if you're used to Voiceflow, maybe it's your first time, you might have, you're very probably used to the share prototype tab. And here we can change the appearance and branding, and you can share just like a effectively like a mini landing page of that prototype that anyone can use. However, because we chose a web chat project here, we're actually able to go over to the integration tab. And now you can see that we have this web chat integration tab that involves installation, general, and appearance. So here I'll go through each one. Installation is the actual code snippet that you would put onto your live chatbot, or excuse me, your live landing page in the body tag. And then that chatbot is live. Whereas the general one, we're going to have you can name the Peloton assistant, which you'll see here, a description. Hillary talked a little bit about this. We can actually have the persistence be to never forget the sessions, or we can have it to be forget after tab closed or reloaded. So that's a nice feature there when it's all about your customer experience. You can have it left or right, and then you can adjust the spacing of the pixels themselves. And then also down here with appearance, this is where you can have fun with brand persona, brand color. You can see I've already switched it out for Peloton, but here it's their actual hex code, their actual logo through and through. Hillary, when it comes to actually showing your work, this obviously changes what's possible a little bit versus just the prototype screen, which is still good, but this is that next step.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is what you're going to want to show, especially in like your portfolio, or if you're doing something where you're pitching new business, or you want a way to sort of create something for your internal stakeholders or people who really need to see and experience it for real. This is a really great way to just make sure that it looks as if it is part of the live website, because it is part of the live website at this time.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I know, Hillary, you're talking too about like taking your prototype work, your portfolio work, that next step. And then, even Nathan in the comments had talked about he's using this to actually go to production and be live on his personal site today, using this installation code and actually just publishing his work, and then having that live live. So let's go through that, and we'll show you the kind of the prototyping phase. Like, let's say you're pitching Peloton, what you might do, and then I'll also show you what it might look like when it's live in production. So here, if we actually publish for production, we need to make sure we have this version saved, so we know, okay, it's not the first version. This is the latest version. We'll call this workshop 1. We'll publish that, and while that publishes, I'll just show you here on the Voiceflow site. We have this widget down here that is built on Voiceflow, and it's live in production. Right? We actually have it clickable. We've designed it with our colors, our brand logos. We can see, carousels and actions like we just built, Hillary, where we can say, hey, here's the full case study, and it actually outbound links to specific case studies. This is a great way to actually use your designs directly in production, if you're looking to actually host and use the web chat that way. But I also want to show, for someone who maybe is looking to pitch, or let's say you're on the JPMC team and you don't want to actually put your new designs in production, but you want to show what it might look like on on a staging website, for example. You can actually do this, where you're going to actually just grab this inner portion of the code. I'm actually going to go to the console here, and we're going to run it. Take a look. Hi, welcome to the Peloton Assistant. What can I help you find? Great. So you can see here, one of our new variants actually populated. What can I help you find? And then we have these 2 buttons. So let's say the check for an order. Let's check your order. What is the email? So I know that in that email database, I have an order associated with my email. And then it says, great, I see your order here. Your tread should be delivered on that date, right? So let's do one more here. And because we had 2 different intents, what can I help you find? Great. And then you can see right here in the website, looks as if it's made out of the box for this pitch, for this internal design review. You actually have these carousels of the different products right here in these buttons.
And that's one I just added as well. So you can see that as soon as this is added, you're able to see it. So you're able to make as many different tests as you want.
Yeah. That was right before I clicked publish then, right before that last iteration.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a really good point, right? Like, if we're back into the design and we're like, okay, I didn't like that, I want to add another thing, then we just click publish. Obviously, in this scenario, you need to, because you're just using the code snippet, you're going to be redoing it here. But then if it was live, like, for example, if we were making changes to the Voiceflow web chat, that's going to happen simultaneously with those publish updates. Great. So I think that, this was exciting to kind of see this live. I do want to show one last thing before we wrap. If you go into the transcripts of the feature here, you can all of a sudden see now we have people who are using the web chat widget, right? And we can say, okay, great. Here's the flow or the conversation turn I just had. I could go in here and I could tag Hillary and say, we need to add an intent for meet the instructors or something, right? And then she would get notified about that. I could say, missing intent. We're going to say, okay, every time we see missing intent, we're going to tag that. Now, all of a sudden, whether it's in your user testing, right? You're sending a staging landing page to all your users to test, or you're actually in production, like I mentioned with Voiceflow, you can start to see how is your chatbot, your web chat experience being used, and how can you make it a little bit better?
Yeah, and this we kind of are alluding to the fact that this can be used for user testing, both internally or externally. And that is something that you should be doing for all of your designs, even if it is something that's just for personal use. This is a really great way to generate user testing and to generate all of this feedback and to see if things are working, and then to be able to build that into learnings and like a case study of saying, this is the result of the user test that I ran on my own. And it's something that's a very easy way for you to be able to generate those. So this is something that I would definitely suggest using, no matter if you are, putting this on a website or you're just having people sort of go through your experience as a test. It's an excellent way to also be tagging maybe the name of the person or tagging these common like errors that you're finding, and then just being able to implement those into your real experience.
Absolutely. Braden, I know you mentioned AI freestyle. Would you want to take over and do a quick demo of that to cap it off? Yeah.
This is kind of fun for everyone to show off. This is like essentially a pairing of, it uses GPT-3, but we've wrapped it in conversation and customer context. And so Sam's gonna be able to ask a question here. And so Voiceflow is actually gonna be able to answer that question, but then you'll see at the bottom, the way we've designed this large language model is it's actually going to try to get you back to the core path of the conversation. And so it's not just going to have your bot talk about anything. It's going to help the user, okay, you want to know about this? That's fine. Now, how can I help you? Right. So it's almost trying to act like it's a real, if you went to like a Starbucks and you said, hey, who's your favorite sports team? The barista probably answers, but it's like, okay, well now what do you want? What do you want to order from Starbucks? Yeah. And so it's a really cool feature that we're implementing. You can almost think of it like an automated fallback system. And so we're constantly going to get better at this. And our goal at Voiceflow is to be sort of the leader in large language models and conversational AI ourselves, so that we can make all the mistakes, so that when we roll it out to customers, you don't have to have any tech problems or anything. So this is already live on the website. You can play around with it. And yeah, it's already live for customers too. Like I think Nate shared his Voiceflow assistant in the chat earlier. Yeah. Nate, you could totally put this live on your own custom assistant today. It's just the switch of a toggle, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and I would love to see people using this. If you want to, after this workshop, kind of recreate even, Peloton experience or whatever we have done here, and then use that. And also using the, AI generated utterances as well. It's definitely like a big step up in terms of how people are designing conversations today.
Yeah, I think we've talked about. Oh, go ahead, Mark. What's up, Brian?
I was gonna say, can I share my screen actually really quick?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll show. I just want to show one thing off quickly. So I posted this on LinkedIn. But so this is actually a screenshot from our own internal Voiceflow customer support bot. And so what's really cool about this is you see a customer came in and they said hi, and that invoked our hello intent. With 100% confidence, we had an exact utterance match. Okay, great. We now gave them our designed response, which was howdy, how can I help you? The user then asked, what is Voiceflow? And we totally should have had an intent covered for this, but we didn't, which is crazy to think about. But the large language model then, using the context of Voiceflow, is able to say, okay, Voiceflow is an all-in-one platform, They then ask, how are we different from competitors? We thought that would be obvious enough where, we didn't need an intent for it, but apparently we do. So then the large language model answers that. And you'll see at the end here, they say customer stories, and we're back on path. Now we're to where we actually do have an intent covering that particular utterance. And so we go in. What's really cool about this approach is now our conversation design team is going to go in and we're going to create flows for what is Voiceflow, that intent, as well as the how are we different from competitors. And so it's actually how we're doing this internally is we have the ability to have a large language model, but these responses are not perfect. If this was our conversation design team, we'd have a really crisp branded response for how are we different from competitors or what is Voiceflow. The large language model was able to keep the conversation going, to keep it fluid. But now our conversation design team is going to go in and actually make it really, really good. And so over time, you're adding more conversation designers to add more coverage of really good, well-crafted responses, but you have that large language model as a backup to handle anything that your bot isn't able to respond with, just so that it keeps the conversation natural and flowing. So I just wanted to show this, how we're doing this internally at Voiceflow. This is already rolled out to 100,000 plus users, and it's getting some awesome feedback. We've found it's a really helpful feature. Yeah. I just want to show that off quick because I think it's pretty cool.
It's a great call, and it's a good culmination of everything we just talked about today, because again, it's like a blend of not having to over design every single fallback while also guiding the user, right? And this allows you to have that nice blended Braden, it's your word, but like curating assistance and AI experiences versus sheer creation from 0 to 1. Now you can really start
Totally.
at 2 and scale from it, right?
And what's going to be really cool too is conversation designers now, instead of you having to always just go through, you know, like you can essentially have like a more of a data-driven approach to your design because you can see what customers are actually asking. You can see it live, and then you can go design great flows for it, right? So the goal is that over time, assistants will be able to be easier to make, and conversation designers can automate more and design more. And so I think there's been a lot of hype over ChatGPT and these things of like, how is that going to impact conversation design? When really we're finding internally, we're doing more conversation design than ever because now we're just taking more conversations than we were before.
Generally, just as someone who has very limited technical skills, unrelated to the bots, I think that just having all of these features available to designers and making these shortcuts and making these things that we can actually do ourselves, and we don't need to use development resources in order to actually, build these experiences. And yeah, it's like low code, and it just is a way that you can really jump from just creating a basic prototype to something that actually is workable and something that can be very, very quickly deployed by your technical team. And that is going to make, all chat experiences better for everyone across the board. So super exciting stuff for sure.